All right, let's get going. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to episode 44 of This Week is Live. So glad to see you well. Thanks for joining us. We've got a ton of news to go into and a whole bunch of very interesting, intersecting stories, and then a little bit of a comment on inspiration before we wrap up with today's episode. So let's start going in what might be the way back for many of you who are watching this right now and listening to this right now. Let's talk about Netflix. Now, most people think of Netflix in terms of streaming and the modern streaming wars as far as movies and television, and this is how people tend to engage with most content nowadays. Buying physical product has become a thing of the past. Well, it wasn't that long ago where everything about streaming wasn't really a thing, and everything was going to rental stores to rent movies or shows. For a long time there were Blockbuster Videos or your local favorite video rental stores. Now, at some point in the late 90s, Netflix was born as a DVD by mail service. So Netflix was at first you go to a website, you picked out what kind of things you wanted to watch, and then they would send you physical DVDs in the mail. You'd watch them, you'd send them back, they'd send you more. And that was a fascinating and exciting thing for most people out there in the world. It was a big, big thing at that time because people didn't really kind of conceive that AAA, anything, anytime, anywhere, on demand content would be a thing of reality, right? Like no one really thought that was going to be a thing. So for quite a while, Netflix was doing very well and growing and was kind of starting to build in terms of what it did. And then as they kind of progressed in 2011, they had taken what was at that point their fledgling streaming product, their Netflix streaming on demand system, and had forked it, separated it from the cost of what was the DVD by mail program. Up until that point, whenever they did actually launch the streaming platform, people got both. You got whatever streaming content they had as well as physical DVDs in the mail. So then they kind of split the process. You could either pay for DVDs in the mail if you wanted them or pay for the streaming product. Now, most of the rest, as they say, is history after that, because not long after that, some of the first run really well professionally created content for streaming House of Cards happened. Now, of course, it's not looked at very favorably now because what's happened with Kevin Spacey and the allegations against him for his on-set demeanor. But at the time, something on the level of quality of what HBO would typically put on the air hadn't been seen on streaming platforms. So all of a sudden this like opened the deluge, and now every company in the world, Paramount and HBO and Disney, all have their, Peacock and everything, have their own streaming services making first run content just for the streaming platforms. This also opened up a brand new golden age of television. This made it possible for a lot of creators and things and talent to be able to get shows made and to become famous behind those things that maybe broadcast networks standards and practices wouldn't allow. Well, what's happened this past week is the final death knell has been sounded for DVD by mail. True Grit was the last DVD that was sent out. They're not asking for the handful of folks that were still DVD by mail customers to return the DVDs. It is being completely shuttered as a part of what Netflix's service is. So, I mean, a lot of you might be like, there's a DVD by mail section of Netflix. But yes, it wasn't that long ago where most people that were out in the world were getting physical DVDs from Netflix instead of streaming on demand options. Now, as a fun little side note for you, is we, light a candle and say goodbye to DVD by mail, and perhaps the ever quickening death knell for DVDs as a physical product in general. I mean, I still like them. I still have them. I still plan to keep the ones that I have, but most people don't, and most people don't care, and most people don't want to buy them. And it's become increasingly less popular to deal with DVDs or Blu-rays for that matter. But as an interesting side note, if you've never heard this before, way back in the year 2000, apparently Blockbuster Video, which was itself struggling kind of at that point and is gone forever and has been for years, had a chance to buy the mega corporation that is Netflix, which makes tons and tons of content and billions of hours of content and some of the most famous shows of the last 20 years. Never mind, just go not without going into a giant exhaustive list, but Stranger Things and Wednesday. Well, in 2000, Blockbuster had a meeting with the main executives from Netflix, which were also in a much more fledgling state of the company at that point, and could have bought the company for $50 million. Just let that marinate in your brain for a minute. Now, shifting, I know we've had a lot of news on this in the last bunch of months, and we talked last week about how the WGA strike had been seemingly resolved, and that the SAG-AFTRA strike, which is the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, say that 3 times fast, that their component, as far as the acting talent, still on strike, still no resolution there, but then there was a quiet storm kind of building on the side, which is that the interactive arm of SAG-AFTRA, which is governed by a contract known as the Interactive Media Agreement. There could be another strike looming in the midst. The membership, or at least a portion of the membership, voted pretty resoundingly. Only about 28% of the membership voted, but then of that 28% that voted, 98% of them voted to authorize a strike if new deal terms could not be met that the SAG-AFTRA Interactive Division found acceptable on behalf of the membership. Well, shortly after we talked about that last week, there was a meeting between SAG-AFTRA negotiators and also the folks that represent the major arm of the video game industry, because, of course, the Interactive Media Agreement represents motion capture artists and voice actor artists, the people who aren't necessarily the programmers that make a video game what it is, but the people who are the... Sorry, I was a moth. People who are the voice talent of the industry that make what is the final product sound and look and have the performances that make it special. And of course, in today's day and age, video games are more elaborate and more like movies than even movies are in some respect. So there isn't just programmers or machines. They're usually human beings who have to voice those characters and bring them to life. So this, as far as Friday is concerned, they have said, and this is what's coming out of SAG-AFTRA's side of it, that SAG-AFTRA and video game employers concluded scheduled negotiations for the Interactive Media Agreement. No deal was reached, and the current agreement will remain in effect while the parties make final efforts to reach a deal. Now, this is like all the major companies that are the video game makers and distributors, your Activisions, Electronic Arts, Epic Games, Take-Two Interactive, Insomniac, Warner Brothers, ton more. All your major companies that employ lots of voice talent or interactive talent for these games. So right now, that doesn't mean they're on strike. It means they're trying to not go into a strike, but there's already an authorization pending. If deal terms can't be met that's satisfactory, a strike could begin very quickly. And already a video game industry that's not been doing super, super great this year could be having an even rougher year where all of a sudden the voice talent isn't possible for the games. So in related news, and this kind of touches far more things than I would have thought, we don't often have stories that equally intersect with the world of music and video games. So this is one. Many of you might not know it. There is a platform that's really wonderful, and it's been around for years, and it's called Bandcamp. Bandcamp is kind of like what CD Baby used to be, but more elaborate, more sophisticated, something that I think you could say made a little bit more for a streaming era. Bands can use it to sell physical products if they want to do pick, pack, and ship and fulfillment. But usually it's a way to sell like digital copies of albums or allow people to give tips to bands, or sometimes bands just use it as like a discovery mechanism, kind of like what SoundCloud was in some respect. And also the ability to allow people to be able to, get songs for free, as a discovery mechanism and a vehicle for it. Well, Bandcamp, like a lot of services like SoundCloud that struggled massively for many, many years, has also had its fair share of struggles, and at various times has done better or worse, but is something that the industry has usually circled around. Bandcamp does a lot to try to help support artists. Their terms are known to be favorable, and ultimately they do a thing called Bandcamp Friday, which is where, they waive fees and artists can make even more money. So this has become a vital part of a lot of mid to lower level band or independent bands' economy, right? Their ability to make a living. Well, interestingly, Bandcamp has been, up until this week, owned by a giant video game company called Epic Games. Interesting. I'm not too sure of the synergy that was originally planned and why a company like Epic Games wanted to have a company like Bandcamp, but I guess we're never going to know because they're not going to own them anymore. Epic Games is a very large video game maker, and they also make a back-end piece of software that many video games license. Now, they're most known in terms of games that they made for the games Unreal, Gears of War, and of course, most prominently, Fortnite in recent terms. Unreal was a big thing quite a while back. Gears of War was a big thing maybe 10, 15 years ago. But, Fortnite is a massive thing. Now, Unreal also has a thing called the Unreal Engine, which is a piece of software that allows for video game makers to have a very elaborate, beautiful 3D world. It's like a toolkit. It's a way to have 3D graphics and a 3D world that someone can then program and create and design to look like something. So, this has always been a big part of Epic Games' business model. So, apparently not doing as well as they had expected, they have now had to lay off 16% of their workforce, which includes about 830 employees. Okay. Now, this is, they're a big company, and there's a few different things that their leader, Tim Sweeney, had to say. He indicated, "For a while now, we've been spending way more money than we earn, investing in the next evolution of Epic and growing Fortnite as a metaverse-inspired ecosystem for creators. I had long been optimistic that we could power through this transition without layoffs, but in retrospect, I see that this was unrealistic. While Fortnite is starting to grow again, the growth is driven primarily by creator content with significant revenue sharing, and this is a lower margin business than we had when Fortnite Battle Royale took off and began funding our expansion. Success with the creator ecosystem is a great achievement, but it means a major structural change to our economics." He added, "We concluded that layoffs are the only way, and that doing them now and on this scale will stabilize our finances." In addition, they're basically indicating, this was a part of what Sweeney had explained, that they're going to be giving severance packages that include 6 months base pay and 6 months of Epic paid healthcare in the US, Canada, Brazil. In the United States, Epic is offering to vest any unearned profit sharing from their 401k. Epic is also offering to accelerate people's stock option vesting schedule through the end of 2024 and are giving 2 additional years from today to exercise the options. Epic will also provide benefits including career transition services and visa support where they can. So clearly a lot of people super unhappy now. And ultimately, what is interesting about all of this is Bandcamp has been agreed to be sold as a part of this cost-cutting measure to try to balance their finances and their books. And what's happening is that Bandcamp is being sold to a company called Songtradr, Songtradr, kind of like mixed down, missing some of our vowels. They're missing that final E. And ultimately, they are a music licensing platform. Now, if you're not really hardcore into the business of music, you're probably not going to understand what that means. This is an apparatus for bands or different labels to be able to go and to have their catalogs available so that movie and TV shows, video games, other things, commercials could potentially license their songs, which is a very important revenue stream for the world of music nowadays. Recorded and sales are recorded, and royalties from record labels mean nothing compared to what they used to. So bands have to make up their revenue wherever they can. And of course, a lot of the time that's live. That's been tough the last few years because of COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic. But a lot of different artists, some don't do this at all. Some would prefer their music not be used anywhere that isn't just being a part of a concert or their own performance or music videos. But some bands do this a lot. This is why you hear the songs for many different bands and commercials and television shows, movies, or movie trailers that you know. And what's happening is that this company, Songtradr, is acquiring it. Now, they're not making any real guarantees as to how much of the staff of Bandcamp they're going to keep or how much they may change at the other side of it. And of course, what's interesting about this, we've been talking a lot about unions in the last few months. Well, apparently the employees of Bandcamp had formed a group called Bandcamp United. And their aim was to be a recognized union and to have collective bargaining arrangements to be able to agree with the Epic Games parent company in terms of workers' rights, pay, things like that, normal contract agreements. And that part, Epic had agreed to, and they were doing that, and they were actively negotiating together. But now that it's been sold, they want that same recognition coming from Songtradr, the new parent company. And they had this to say. They issued their own statement in the wake of this news. Bandcamp United is demanding employment offers for all workers, clear, consistent, and equitable voluntary severance offers, and recognition of their union at Songtradr with a speedy continuation to bargaining while maintaining all the progress that has been made at the table. At the moment, Songtradr is offering positions to workers on a rolling basis with a 72-hour turnaround for acceptance, despite the sales document stipulating the purchaser allow 7 days to consider the offer. In addition, Epic Games and the union have not come to an agreement on terms for voluntary severance. Bandcamp isn't Bandcamp without the people who build and maintain the website. We are the people who made this website the platform that it is for artists, Ed Blair, a Bandcamp support specialist, indicated. And he said, Songtradr not immediately recognizing Bandcamp United is a worrying indicator that they have misunderstood the value of Bandcamp. It's not a platform or a portal. It's a painstakingly handcrafted community. The workers who make up Bandcamp United are essential for the future of Bandcamp, said the union. And in response, Songtradr had this to say. Not necessarily the most ringing endorsement of finding middle ground, but this is what they had to say. We have received Bandcamp United's letter and are reviewing it. Supporting the Bandcamp community will be our number one priority once the purchase is completed. Songtradr does not own or control Bandcamp yet. We are in the process of acquiring Bandcamp from Epic Games, and we expect the transaction to close within the next few weeks. Epic is committed to running Bandcamp Friday as planned and will ensure Bandcamp can continue to operate and support artists through this transition. They add the following, though. Not all Bandcamp employees will receive offers from Songtradr. Based on its current financials, Bandcamp requires some adjustments to ensure a sustainable and healthy company that can serve its community of artists and fans long into the future. Those that don't receive offers within the next few weeks will receive severance from Epic as a part of their layoffs, as communicated on September 28. We will work toward a fair and equitable outcome for the global members of Bandcamp team. Songtradr is planning to keep all of the existing Bandcamp services that fans and artists love, including Bandcamp Fridays, Bandcamp Daily, and its Artist First revenue share. So, not terribly the most reassuring statement if you're someone who works for Bandcamp and have been working hard for years. And I mean, terrible. And, I have never myself personally been in a position where, I guess that's not true. There was one company I worked at that was acquired by another, but they didn't do layoffs. But it is a story, as my adult life has rolled on, is a very sad and unfortunate and common tale. One bigger company comes and gobbles up a smaller company. Layoffs often follow. Usually one of the first things that happens is a lot of people get let go. So anybody who is at Bandcamp who's uncertain tonight, anybody who has already lost their job or hasn't, we all hope that you land on your feet, things get better, or that you find the terms that you deserve from the new parent company. Elsewhere in the world of music, there was a festival that happened recently called the Global Citizen Festival. Now, this is a festival that was always kind of aimed at highlighting causes. And this is something where they've often tried to basically spotlight awareness for certain issues, world hunger and climate change. And it's not exactly a nonprofit. There's been some degree of corporate sponsorship behind it, but it's had, at times, a really impressive lineup over the years, different bands of different genres, different styles. And it's at least coming from the right pulpit, right? Like wanting to raise awareness for good issues and trying to make good things happen. This particular year, the most significant bands playing were Red Hot Chili Peppers and Lauryn Hill. Megan Thee Stallion was supposed to play, but she backed out and then joined Beyonce in Texas instead for a guest spot appearance at one of her shows that Beyonce was playing. And interestingly to this, apparently, because of a combination of just the amount of people that showed up for it, people are wanting to rush out to live music after several years of being stuck inside during the pandemic. And, rain. Apparently, this festival, which took place in New York in a part of Central Park in what's commonly referred to as, I want to get the name of this right, the Great Lawn, the Central Park Great Lawn. Apparently, just those two things, being rain and the amount of people, and the lawn was severely damaged. And it's caused enough damage that it's going to be closed, at least this portion of Central Park. If you've never been to New York City, Central Park is a massive, massive park. So it's not the whole park. It's one particular portion of it, but it's going to be closed until April. And the festival had this to say in response to the news that had happened. This year's rainfall meant closer alignment with city agencies and stakeholders than ever before. In the months leading up to the festival on September 23 and daily in the week before the event, we worked closely with the New York City Mayor's Office, New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, Office of Emergency Management, NYPD, FDNY, and the Central Park Conservancy. Ultimately, the City of New York, the Department of Parks and Recreation, and determined that this year's festival should go ahead in the rain. In addition to the fee paid to the city each year for use of the park, Global Citizen works with the Central Park Conservancy to assess and cover the costs of any damage. And we remain committed to fulfilling those obligations as we have since 2012. This was always communicated to the Central Park Conservancy before this year's event and after it, as always. There might be something of a story beyond this that we don't know. I don't have any additional details as of press time to basically indicate, but, doesn't sound like a raucous and intense festival. But then again, rain is rain, and it doesn't take much before rain does a whole hell of a lot of damage. And then lastly, and super, super significantly, Tupac Shakur. Now, some of you are old enough to be very well familiar with Tupac Shakur and his contributions to music and his legacy, and some of you might not really know him that well. And Tupac Shakur was a part of what was at the time the burgeoning gangster rap scene. And he came up as originally a frontrunner for Digital Underground. He was kind of one of the hype men in the background. If you watch some of Digital Underground's old videos, if you don't remember who Digital Underground is, that's where Humpty Hump comes from, the Humpty Dance. Well, Tupac was one of the frontrunners at a very young age. It was kind of a loose part of that collective, and then burst out on his own, and almost instantly, as a part of going on his own, became a phenomenon and really quickly became really famous, had a bunch of legal trouble, was in jail, out of jail, was very successful, and then came out of jail, signed a Death Row Records, started showing up in songs and videos with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and was affiliated with Suge Knight, and ultimately made a ton of music in the time in these very few years, and then was unfortunately shot and killed at the ripe old age of 25 years old. And the details of that have been a giant mystery ever since. I mean, we're talking, it's been 27 years where that crime has technically gone unsolved. And I mean, he was at that point one of the most famous people in America. And little by little, things started to trickle out and happen. More information about what happened that night happened, and what's happened now, and this happened literally the day after we got off the air last week, is that there has finally, after 27 years, been an arrest. A gentleman named Dwayne Keith Davis, or his street name being Keith D, has been arrested. And the charges and the specs of what this is a little nebulous. We'll get into this in a second here. And he's 60 years old. So obviously this 27 years ago was a long time. He was arrested on 9/29. He's awaiting arraignment in prison. And the charges are murder with the use of a deadly weapon. This is what's being alleged of him. Now, the Las Vegas Homicide Department has been looking into this for 10 and the better part of 20 years. For a long time, there wasn't much activity, and then there's been a lot of activity. Some of the people that were reputed to have been involved or present are dead, have passed on as years have gone on. And as things have kind of evolved, this person, Davis, has publicly stated he was present and that he was in the front seat of a white Cadillac that pulled up next to Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight when Tupac was shot. Now, if you don't know the details, Tupac and Suge Knight were present for a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand Hotel, one of the big hotels, and at the time, one of the biggest in Las Vegas at that point. And then there was some kind of an altercation, and then as they left, car pulled up next to him, shot a bunch of times. Tupac was shot 4 times, rushed to a hospital, and then ultimately, that was on September 7th, 1996, and then 5 days later, on September 13th, he had passed away due to internal bleeding. So what law enforcement has claimed they have put together, what they're alleging, was that they had performed a raid on the home of Dwayne Keith Davis's wife. They were looking for documents, they were looking for evidence, they were looking for anything that tied him to the murder. And apparently, as a part of the raid, they found a memoir. There was a memoir that they found in that home, and that ultimately, let's see if I have the name of the memoir for you here. I thought I did have it written down. I do not. I apologize. There was a memoir that they found that was about his life, being a reputed gang member and being present at the night where Tupac Shakur was murdered, and apparently along with some other information and documents and potentially even photographs, they think they have enough to make a case against him. Now, like I say, arraignment hasn't happened. That has been delayed as of the other day for 2 weeks, so he has not been fully arraigned yet. But the Las Vegas Homicide Department is painting Dwayne Keith Davis as the architect of what happened. What they're saying is that after the fight happened, there was some kind of altercation between Tupac and Suge Knight's crew and Dwayne Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson, and that the Las Vegas Homicide Department is alleging was that Davis had orchestrated with a group of men what ultimately ended up being the shooting. They're alleging that he was the one that handed the gun to the shooter. It's not being stated who the shooter was, but they're painting him as the mastermind behind all of this. This is going to play out for a long time. And this is not going to be something that's going to resolve quickly because it's been 27 freaking years. maybe people were, loose lips sink ships kind of place, and they just weren't talking, and nobody was willing to tell the truth about what they knew and everything like that. Who knows? It's surprising that it took this long for these details to come to life and for there to be any action in this case. I mean, there couldn't possibly have been more eyes on it for a quarter century now. But we'll keep you updated as more details emerge. Right now, it is just an arrest. That is not a conviction. Innocent until proven guilty in this country. Now, I wanted to end off today, and I wanted to kind of tell a little story and speak about something that, I'm going to just amorphously call the wellspring of inspiration. And this is kind of, where does creativity come from? Where do ideas come from? Now, if you look behind me, right there, you'll see a drum head. Now, this was a drum head used by the drummer for Serj Tankian's solo band. Serj Tankian, we've spoken about in the show before. He's the lead singer of System of a Down. He's a great singer, an unusual singer, a great singer, and a great songwriter. And this was his solo project. As System of a Down had kind of slowed down following the release of Mesmerize and Hypnotize, he started doing his own solo works, which were still rock records, but were very heavily piano based. Most of the songs were based on, melodies he crafted on piano and then rock songs written around them. Those first couple of records, he did 2 or 3 solo records. They're all really, really good. I don't think people talk about them as much as they should, but they're all really, really good records. And this was the first album, the first tour. This was at the Wiltern Theater in Los Angeles. So they played a really great show, and, people were really understanding, and there was a ravenous desire for System of a Down songs. They played none. This was all Serj Tankian solo material and some covers. And ultimately, they ended the show doing a cover of the Dead Kennedys' Holiday in Cambodia, which they did a really great job covering. And then as the show ended, the band kind of waved from the stage. The drummer just flung something. And as, my friend and I who were there, I was there with my best friend, we kind of moved a little bit forward through the crowd. People were starting to trickle back because they got the sense the show was done. And then I just saw this giant disc coming my way, and I just, being a tall person, I just reached out and grabbed it. And it turned out to be that drumhead, which every member of the band had signed. So that's why it's framed behind me. Now, one of the things that I'd heard Serj Tankian say at that show and other shows, that some of the songs that he was playing there were things that came to him in a dream. Now, one of the best songs from that first album was a song called Baby, which, was pretty simple, just about missing somebody, whether either a relationship that was lost or just someone that he loved that wasn't there right at that moment. And it was pretty simple when you think about it. Baby, oh babe, baby, I miss you, la, 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 la. And he described it as that he had that melody come to him in a dream, and that the next morning he woke up, the melody was in his head, and he picked up his phone, he turned on like a voice notes application, and he just recorded it. And then that weird idea that hit him literally in a dream became what I would say was one of the best songs of that first solo record. And that's a bizarre kind of thing, right? Plucked from where? The gossamer chains of the atmosphere, the heavens, divine inspiration, who knows? Neurons firing against other neurons, things, in some amalgamation of like nerve endings and memories and the things we've been trying to process in our daily life, fermenting into dreams. Who knows? And this is one of the fascinating things about creativity. Now, creativity and getting things done don't always mesh, because in a world that operates in trying to make a living and survive, you have to get things done. It doesn't matter how much you care or don't care, because either you get the job and you get to keep the job, or you want a raise and you don't get a raise, or your boss is mad at you. And of course, there's a whole army of ethics and considerations behind those things that every person probably lands differently on them, because at the end of the day, you're not your job, you're your life, your family, the things you do, but you still have to make a living. You still have to do things, and getting things done doesn't know creativity. Getting things done knows this has to be done, and has to be done now, right? This is nothing that can wait. This is something that has to be contended with. But creativity, expression, is all the muse, right? When does something hit you? When does something appear to you? When does something occur to you? Why does it occur to you? And is it just happenstance? Is it something that doesn't really connect to anything? Are you just capturing something of the ether of the universe? Or are you actually making choices that lead to something that works, that's enjoyable, right? Whether we're talking about a book, a novel, a video game, a movie, music, a television show, Of course, many of these things require more than just one person to make them happen. It's not like, you're doing pottery and one person can make an excellent pot. It's very rare nowadays that one person can make an excellent video game or even an excellent album for that matter. I mean, because even if you're a Trent Reznor character and you play all the instruments, usually somebody's going to master it. Somebody's going to do the artwork. So much of this, and what is really fascinating to me, is that some of the best artists will tell you they don't know that they're in the pilot seat, that some of these things just occur to them, or they feel like they're capturing them as they feel that thing happen. And therein lies kind of the tug of war of a world bent on consumption and creators who have to find some measure of quality, of course, because creating and being an artistic means is the hardest businesses there is, right? It's really, really hard to be creative and a creative type, a creative minded person, and be able to make a good living doing it. And if you don't do a good job, there could go your living. Things happen just that fast. People's infatuation with you, unless you're like the Rolling Stones and you've got massive hit songs that will last for decades, hinges on, do you continue to do things that people might want to hear, listen to, experience, engage, read? Do they think it's good? So there's an inherent tug of war behind that in terms of, was this good? Do I have a good idea? Or am I just putting something out there? Now, there's different characters in different places. There is your Jeff Barrow, Portishead type people, the people who clearly, slave over every nuance and every detail of things and are working incredibly hard to try to make something work the way they think it should. Massive Attack is another great band who is very much kind of in that pocket. But then there are those things that they're just there. They're just apparent. Now, I keep a very busy schedule in my world. There's not much time for anything other than what I'm doing, and there's just one thing kind of after another. But I can tell you, in the rare moments in the last 10 years where I've had any time to stop, I might just have a day or two. It might just be, just a day or two where things are quiet. It's just for some reason things work out to be where it's chill. There's not much going on. And damned if 4 or 5 more things don't just occur to me. I don't know where they come from. And right now I'm sitting on a bank of 20 things I'd like to do, a whole mess of different creative endeavors that who knows if I'll even ever get a chance to start. May not, may never have time. But it is wild to me how I can pump the brakes in the slowest measure. And there it is. All of a sudden, something's like, hey, do this. And I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. That's so exciting. I once interviewed Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys fame, and of course, Jello Biafra and the Melvins, and and his newer band, Jello Biafra and the Guantanamo School of Medicine. And he described it, a lot of what he does as constantly engaging with different kinds of art and creativity, and one thing inspiring one thing inspiring another, that inspiring another. And it's just this big chain of inspirations fueling ideas, and that he was just voraciously consuming things. I think he even described it, if I remember correctly, that he had like a pile of records of obscure, weird bands he had found at record stores and things, and he just had no concept of order. He just plucked one off the top of the pile, put it on, and he was just constantly experimenting and engaging with different things. And it's, a thing that I think is important to remember, because sometimes people find themselves in a place where they need to create something. They want to create something, but then that inspiration, that wellspring of inspiration, it isn't there. And I think it's important to remember, because as much as you hear me say this, there's an endless fountain of stuff that I'd like to do. There's been times in my life where I couldn't rub 2 sticks together to make a spark. Had no idea what I wanted to do, and would probably sit there for weeks at a time, and nothing would occur to me. No ideas, no thoughts. I think I would put it as, the best that you can do is to give yourself the time and the opportunity and allow yourself to be off the hook. This is also why some of your favorite bands might disappear for a good number of years, because a great artist knows if they don't have an idea that's great, they might just hold off until they do. There's no need to try to force something if it's not working the way that they know it should, if it's not up to the standard of quality that would work. I mean, sometimes other things and books and movies and TV shows, and I think you can make the argument what's going on, say, in the world of film with Marvel Cinematic Universe is a need for product to push something out, and maybe the ideas aren't as strong as the ideas that were there before, but they still have to put something out. And those things may not be governed by the wellspring of inspiration. They may not have that really great backbone thread that makes them so engaging and riveting. They might be just rushing through it to continue to push product through an assembly line chain. But if you're in that position where you find yourself and you're like, what the hell am I going to do? I don't know what connects to what. I don't know how to keep coming up with something. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. Give yourself time. Really, at the end of the day, there's no rush. And if you try to force it, it might not come out organically with what it is, what you need to be doing, where you want to be in that. Give yourself the space and the freedom to be able to pull back, catch your breath, and it will occur to you. It'll come to you in time. It'll probably hit you when you don't expect it. It'll probably come to you when you're not anticipating that you're going to have an idea, when you finally let go of this desire. It's kind of like, trying to grasp something slippery, and the harder you try to grasp it, it just slips out of your hands. If you give yourself that space, and then, of course, be engaging, be thinking about creative things, be thinking about all that is interesting or exciting to you. Find the things that are interesting or exciting to you. And if you allow yourself that space, inevitably it will come. That's all for episode 44 of This Week is Live. I want to thank you again for joining us wherever it is that you do. We obviously do these shows Thursdays, roughly at about 5:30, 6 o'clock Pacific time, live on Twitch. And then we post these Tuesday or Wednesday the following week on YouTube. If it's on Twitch in the live stream here, if it's in YouTube after the fact, if it's in any of the places that we post clips from these, whether that's YouTube Shorts, if that's on Instagram and Reels, if it's on TikTok, if it's on Twitter, or if it's on Facebook, wherever it is that you engage with this, we so very much appreciate you. If you don't already, please subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitch, follow us everywhere that we are. On YouTube, we're Mixdown Video, MXTWN Video, and on Twitch, we are just MXTWN. Please follow us and stay tuned for more broadcasts. As I've mentioned, since this is episode 44, we have 6 episodes left. I'm not going to exactly call this a season 1, but this is going to be the final stretch before we take a break, and then we'll start again in 2024. So stick with us. We're going to have some fun stuff happening in the episodes to come. Keep watching. We'll have lots more interesting stuff and interviews and shows and news and stories and things we're tracking and other surprises that will come, I promise. And in the meantime, please join us again here next week live on Twitch. Thanks for joining us. So glad to see you well.